Hi there, my name is Trolls and welcome to Soundpaint. In this video tutorial we're going to go deep into the matrix, or the mod matrix as it's also known as. The matrix is a place where only the most seasoned sonic sailors should go. This is really where we go on the back side of the engine. Imagine you have like a car engine, you open the hood and you're now down with the engine components and you start fusing them together and making your own engine. That's what the mod matrix is about. But if you're a newcomer to advanced sampling and building your own virtual instruments and so forth, I highly encourage you to watch a couple of our other tutorial videos first. We have an overview video. We have a couple of videos where I'm showing the effects system, our rack system, our arpeggiator and all that stuff. And the reason I say that is because you'll become familiar with all the different components inside of Soundpaint. And the matrix is really where you take all those components and sort of fuse them together, if you will. But if terms like CC automation, LFOs, ADSRs, offset, release triggers, attack triggers don't scare you at all, you've definitely come to the right place. I'm thinking this video just to show you a variety of different patches and go into the mod matrix and examine what's going on inside of them so I can show you exactly how the instruments are fine-tuned. I use the mod matrix primarily to shape my instruments a little more when I can't use the more generic features inside of Soundpaint. The mod matrix is really where you want to go if you want to fine-tune things and do really delicate adjustments to your instruments. But I say we just get started. Let's just stack a bunch of like virtual blue pills and see how deep the rabbit hole goes when it comes to the modulation matrix inside of Soundpaint. I'll see you inside of the door. Okay, we got a fresh instance of Soundpaint in front of us. If we click on the matrix over here, we'll notice that there's nothing inside of it yet because we haven't loaded any instruments. Let me just load something quickly. I'm going to type in 1928 and load the sustains. Okay, we got a working piano. Let's add an effect to that. For example, our shimmer reverb here. And let's say that we want to control the mix of the shimmer reverb here. And for example, I want to assign it to my mod wheel. All I do is just to right click on it, go down here and click on MIDI CC automation, move my mod wheel. You'll notice the CC value up here changes and just click out here and you're good to go. Let me try another one here. I'm going to right click on the pitch shift of the shimmer reverb, click on add MIDI CC, wiggle my controller, and I now have control over the pitch shift of the shimmer as well. Okay, and let's say that I have a really unique setup here of my reverb and I love this particular layout here. If you ever want to save particular configurations under effects, just use our presets over here, give it a name, and you're good to go. You also use the same method for assigning LFOs. So right click, choose the different settings in your LFO. You got all the common suspects. You can either synchronize to your DAW or go rogue and have full analog control. One thing that we commonly do when we make programs for Soundpaint is to limit the ranges here. That's really useful in many cases. Let me just assign a few more things here. I'm gonna give this some LFO love. Maybe assign this one to a second LFO and let's change a few things. Let's say that you want an overview of the current madness we're witnessing here. Just go up here to the right and click on the matrix and we're now inside of the matrix. Over here, you'll see all the different things that we assigned different values to. In this case, all the different parameters of the shimmer reverb. We'll see what source they're associated to over here. So LFOs and different types of CCs. And you can access the different parameters. So in case of CC and LFOs, they look a little bit different, but you can always access them inside the matrix here and do individual adjustments to them. So it's a very easy way of doing more advanced manipulation of your instrument and being able to access it all from one page. And that's sort of the matrix in a nutshell. But as I mentioned in the beginning, the matrix is a rabbit hole of rabbit holes. I have about a dozen of different patches here that I want to take you through. We're going to listen to each of them. We're going to go in and examine what's going on the backside, inside of their matrices. What is it that makes those particular patches beautiful and unique in terms of using the matrix? And also go into some of the more common features, for example, how to create vibrato in instruments, different tricks in terms of controlling effects and using them musically with your instruments, how to automate morphing, and many other things. And speaking of morphing, check this one out.
A estação está lotada, aguardem para a nova liberação de embarque. Atenção, quem já possui o cartão de embarque pode embarcar pela rua Teixeira de Meu Acesso, Teixeira de Meu.
Isn't that cool? It's essentially a voice that is morphed into a synthesizer, and in this case the voice coming from Brazil, it has to conform to the synthesizer, so even stuff like whispering gets tonality in it. Let me just show you what they sound like individually.
Compra de bilhetes do lado direito, embarque do lado esquerdo.
Isn't it wild? It sounds nothing like the actual sound we just listened to. Let me show you the synthesizer here. But combined and morphed, they sound like this. Yeah, morphing can be fun. I can also right click it here and let's say add CC automation and just see what happens if we have it just going back and forth here. And as you may noticed when I was playing this patch here, the volume kept going up and down. Let's see what's going on here. I can right click on it. You'll see that it says currently at CC1, so that's one way of understanding what it's associated to. But we can also go down here in the matrix and see what's going on. So in this case here, part 2 volume associated to CC1. I can change that in here if I want to, but I like the way it is. You'll notice over here as well that it's a little bit shortened here, and that's just to make sure that the volume of part 2 doesn't dominate that of part 1. I like to have my program sort of set that way so they never go into overdrive once you start putting different things together, but you just have a nice even volume. You'll also see the LFO that we just assigned to the morphing here going on here. We can change that as well, do randomized shapes, and see what that sounds like. And you'll also notice that we got a few EQ bands associated to CC1. So in this case here, that would be inside of effects. You'll notice when I move my mod wheel here that the EQ gets sharpened a little bit. I like to do that with instruments sometimes. I actually use it more commonly than filters. It just offers a little bit of an accent to the instrument when you move your controller. You can actually also associate this to your velocity on your keyboard. Again, click Change MIDI CC Automation here and click on Velocity Note Response. So now depending on how hard I click on my keys, I'm gonna get different velocity ranges. And you'll see here that it's somewhat limited right now, but if I broaden it up here, you'll see that it's gonna go all over the spectrum. And that was the secret sauce of life within a lifetime. All right, let's try another program here. Barbary Arc Whole Gate. And let's try to strip it from the effects as well and listen to it in its core state. So once again, using the effects to shape new colors in the tool. In this particular patch here, shaping with the EQ, adding some granular reverb to the voice, essentially creating reverbs out of tiny fragments of the voices themselves. And then our lovely gate here, which is almost going all the way up in the mix here, which is how we can create those rhythmic effects. But you'll notice here when I move my mod wheel that it's fully associated to it. So that's why you didn't hear the rhythms in the beginning. Mod wheel's all the way down, and I can sculpt it as I want. If we go inside of the matrix here, 4 different values here, each with unique ranges and all assigned to CC1 over here. And the gate can be really funny to use. Let me just add 32 steps to it here and fool around with it in real time. I love this guitar so much. But let's say we want to add a little more character to it. Let's add an LFO up here to the pitch, which is essentially going to create a form of vibrato, if you will. If you notice here, we have a very, very narrow distance. That's because I want my vibrato to be very, very narrow when it comes to the instrument, since it's such a finite thing for many instruments. Okay, so we can see that the LFO is doing its thing up here, but let's say that I actually want to control this amount with my mod wheel. Obviously, when you go into vibrato, you don't want to have it on all the time. So in this case here, I need to associate the amount of the LFO to my mod wheel. So I'm going to right click on the amount here, choose add MIDI CC automation, and move the controller that's controlling the amount of the vibrato. And you'll notice when I move my mod wheel that we have full vibrato control now. Okay, so how did we do that again? Let me try to set up another vibrato here. We have a clean slate in front of us. This time I'm going to choose M pitch here instead of pitch. I prefer micro pitch because it's only within a semitone, so it's a little easier to control the range when it comes to traditional vibrato. So just right click on it here, and we'll make sure that the parameter is not too big, maybe something like that. That means we have 2 semitones here, and we're taking about 30-35% of each. But remember that we also want to control the amount. So while we're in here, I'm just going to right click on amount, click add MIDI CC automation, wiggle my controller, my mod wheel here, and we're good to go. We now have fully controllable vibrato. And if we go inside the matrix, we'll see what we just did. First, setting the LFO amount to micro pitch, and secondly, control that LFO from our mod wheel on CC1. So just another example of vibrato. This is an acoustic guitar, so for certain styles of music, you're going to find a slower type of vibrato here. You'll notice up here on M pitch that it's moving not as fast as the electric one. Let's right click here and see what's going on. We notice that the range is somewhat narrow and the frequency is not too high. The amount is also associated to my mod wheel. And if we examine the mod matrix on this one here, we'll notice the 2 usual suspects when it comes to vibrato, the micro pitch and the LFO. And you'll also see that there's a little bit of stuff going on the EQ5, probably helping to brighten up the sound when I go up on my mod wheel. So those higher transients on the guitar, as we go into more desperate type of vibrato, you'll notice that the note gets a little more sweetened here as well. Isn't that just the sweetest thing? This upright Broadwell is the same piano brand line that Beethoven used to do his sketches on. It's just a beautiful piano. You may have noticed that the volume down here in part 3 was going up and down. Let's see what's going on. Right click on it and we'll see that it's set to CC1, so my mod wheel is controlling it. So essentially adding non-tonal, that's what NT means, attacks to the piano here. So these sort of thunky percussive sounds are coming from this part here. And if you notice here in part 3, you're going to see a unique icon here. Let's click on it. We'll see that one note stretch is activated here for this particular part, meaning that there's one specific note in this instrument here that was spread across my entire keyboard. It's a really unique feature for those of you guys that really fall in love with a specific note on an instrument. Sometimes on a guitar or piano, there are certain sweet spot notes that can be beautiful just to load. Let me show you an example of that. So how many samples do you think that was made up from what you just heard? Let's find out. Let's click on the button here. We'll notice that there's one note playing here. So in essence, what you just listened to was one single note, but with infinite dynamic layers spread across your entire keyboard. That is in many ways one of the most beautiful qualities about Soundpaint, that you can find one note, that perfect note that has a little bit of a brush in the beginning, whatever it is that inspires that particular note, take it and isolate it, and you have a beautiful instrument. And let's try to bring the instrument back to its core state, so it's a default, meaning that there's going to be unique samples per keys. Let's listen to that. So for example, if we take another note here and isolate it, let me just take a random note. Now the D sharp 3 is the entire keyboard, and the texture is going to be of whatever that key was. Isn't that just a beautiful patch? The Juno 6 just has some incredible magic in it. In this case here, I'm using two different parts, and all I'm really doing is to increase the volume of the second part associated to my mod wheel as well. But then there's a few more things going on in the realm of effects as well. You'll see inside of the EQ here, for example, when I move the mod wheel, there's multiple parameters that are moving just slightly to enhance the sound. In the filter here, we got some cutoff control, but you'll notice here that it's more limited again. Always keep these ranges more limited so you're not skating across your entire controller. You'll see the same thing here on plate as well, a very limited range, so you just get a little bit of extra reverb when you move the mod wheel up and you start increasing the intensity of this second instrument. And if we want to examine closer what's going on, click on Matrix and you'll see all the affected parameters out here. And you'll probably start to see the contour of a pattern in terms of how I like to program things. I like to really use the EQ, keep very narrow settings on it, but help sort of shape the sound a little more. I like to keep my cutoff in a limited range. Volume for a secondary instrument is always beautiful, but keep it limited to what's comfortable with the natural dynamic range of the first and dominant instrument. And then a little bit of extra love by creating a limited range to control the old school plate verb. All right, check this one out and try to think about what's going on while I'm playing it. So you probably noticed that the pitch over here was moving. It's an interesting patch because it's morphing two different instruments together, which means that one instrument has to conform to the pitch of another one, but at the same time, I'm moving the pitch of the one that's not conforming just to see what happened. I had no idea what that would sound like. But let's try to mess it up a little more here. I'm gonna right click on the morph button here. I'm gonna move my mod wheel and I have full control over the morph. So next time we played, the pitch and the morph are gonna accelerate at the same time. I'm also gonna add a little bit of shimmer reverb and associate that to my mod wheel as well. I'm gonna limit the range so we don't get too much shimmer inside of the sound, and let's check it out. And this is a really good example. I've never done this before, so I just realized right now, because the pitch has to conform, it's almost like a type of filter, if you will, because it never really goes out of tune because it has to conform to the pitch of the dominant instrument here. It's a very interesting effect. It's sort of a filter with a lot more sort of raw bumps in it. Very interesting. In this next example, I also want to take you into the morphing mode and this time put an LFO on it. But first, let me just play these two instruments isolated. All right, so that's interesting. One note is kind of bassy and the other one is kind of breathy. So I wonder if we could create some kind of like breathing effect. Let's click on LFO. Let's limit the range up here so we don't get too much of that bassy kind of stuff. Let's see what happens. Right, and let's add a chorus and assign the same LFO we have for the morph to the range of the chorus. And let's add some gate to it as well. Nice and juicy analog synth. Let's add a filter to it as well. But in this case here with the filter, I don't want to associate it to my mod wheel, but rather to the velocity of my keyboard. If you ever want to do that, just click velocity note response up here. You'll notice that the CC values are gone. It's now the velocity of your keyboard controlling this given parameter. So in essence, the harder I play, the more the cutoff of the filter gets loose. Let me try to associate the mix parameter for the other effects to the velocity as well. Let's do the same here on the Lexi. Right click, click velocity. And now all three effects have to correspond to my velocity. Let's see what it sounds like. But on this one, I'm immediately noticing that the mix of the reverb is sort of destroying the sound. So I'm gonna limit the range right now to something much smaller. So this program is a good example of a more complex matrix. Dan Chimey that made the program, and you can always see the signature, by the way, of program makers up here, really took his creative liberties here in terms of pushing 4 different solo voices, but in different directions on the pitch. So when I'm moving my mod wheel here, you'll notice that all the different pitches here are moving in different directions, creating this unique cluster effect. And on top of that brilliance, you'll also notice that the micro pitch is moving here, also associated to my mod wheels. And when I'm moving here, it all sort of gets more jittery. Let's take a quick look here at the matrix as well. So a lot of different stuff going on here, and just a brilliant way of displaying how deep you can go into the matrix and how simple it can be on the surface here. And let me just add a rain delay to that. This delay here emulates rain, so your notes become these beautiful cascading reverb fragments. It's beautiful, somewhere between a delay and a reverb. Let me show you another little great trick for the mod matrix and the LFO. This is a trick by Nicholas Semrat, really brilliant for taking a normal patch and just with one click making it sound like an old school vintage VHS kind of instrument, maybe even Betamax. But that's not what I mean with old school, even though the roads are. Let's add a LFO automation to it. In this case here, we're going to use a square, and we're going to make sure that the distance up here in the pitch is very narrow, so only 40% of one semitone going both ways. But the square here is going to create this sort of static way of going back and forth between the two notes here. But check out what it sounds like. Before and after. And this LFO or VHS trick works on any instrument. And let's examine one more. In this one here, we're going to take a look at our 16 crowtail bow. We have a variety of different instruments in Soundpaint that are bowed, and it's really neat sometimes to combine different bowed instruments because you get different kind of textures. Let me just play the two individual parts of this patch. And combined, they sound like. And let's try to sprinkle some effects on it. First, our EQ5. You'll notice again how I'm shaping the very upper part of the frequencies here. That's on my mod wheel, the tried and true CC1. I'm also adding a modern digital reverb and a Lexi emulation as well. So for me, that's a full instrument. It's really rich, it's expressive, it's doing everything it needs to do. And this is normally where I would stop it. You can see in the mod matrix, there's not that much going on. We're shaping a little bit of the EQ5 and fully controlling the volume of the second instrument, which I really like to do. You'll notice up here and almost have a full volume up and down set on the secondary instrument. It tends to just give more expression to the instrument in its totality. And sometimes when a secondary part of an instrument becomes more present, it can be a cool thing to take down the volume. I'm not doing it here, but we could, in terms of sort of saying, okay, so when you go up, I go down a little bit, so the instruments give more space for each other. And the way you do that is by using reverse behavior. So when I click on this, the entire scheme is going to work the opposite way. So when I move my mod wheel up, it goes down, and when I move my mod wheel down, it goes up. And you'll see the opposite behavior over here. This can allow for more elegant expression. All right, let's try to add some shimmer reverb to that as well. In this case, I'm going to click on the preset here, Heaven 7, meaning that we have 7 tones on the pitch shifter. I'm going to right click on mix, move my mod wheel, and control the mix here. Let's just limit it a little so it's not going all the way, but maybe like right here. And that is pretty much it. This is the mod matrix. It can be complicated. You can do whatever you want. You can fuse whatever aspects of the engine. Every single parameter can be right-clicked more or less. Even on parameters that don't have sliders or text, for example, you can also automate them. But as I've mentioned in other videos as well, you don't have to use the mod matrix. This is really just for you guys that want to go deep and add these small carvings and ornaments to your virtual instruments. And in some way embrace the tradition of being a digital instrument luthier or instrument builder when we talk about like shaping like the very high transients of a sound or combining 3 different reverbs in one patch. And the benefits of having a mod matrix here, but being able to completely switch instruments out. So all these automations we have here, I can easily apply to another instrument. Let me just do one more thing here. Let me just load like a synthesizer or something. Make sure that I'm in parts mode. So I don't want to override this entire program by being in program mode, but be in parts mode and then just start selecting the instruments we want for this one. And just grab 2 synths here.